Alright, we are back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, we have a ton of developments to get to overall. I definitely wanted to try to get this video out way sooner. However, with the kind of information in here, it's going to be a bit of an emotional roller coaster, to say the least, with some of the general, coaching cycle decisions, and also just some other news of potential positive outlook and just tragic outcomes as well. And that, frankly, undersells some of these. But for the first piece of news, we begin with a follow-up. Because if you guys remember the Brian Flores lawsuit against the NFL via, allegations and claims of discrimination in coaching cycles, has been in the books for a few years now. As this USA Today article states, essentially, quote, 4 years ago, then former Miami Dolphins coach Brian Flores filed a lawsuit against the Dolphins, New York Giants, and Denver Broncos, alleging racial discrimination in their hiring practices, end quote. Now, newer developments have come out about it over the years, with coaches Steve Wilks and Ray Horton joining the lawsuit as co-defendants in this specific case. But in terms of the motion of actually taking it to trial, to a court, not much has really happened over the years. There's been a constant struggle to, execute this in the way that, either side sees fit. Typically, the NFL would be in a situation where they try to run it through arbitration. And as we would eventually find out, that is the route that they would try to take. In fact, if you go to this article from Reuters here, they also explain that, quote, in August 2025 ruling from the Federal Appeals Court in Manhattan said a provision in the NFL Constitution granting Commissioner Roger Goodell unilateral authority to arbitrate was plainly unenforceable because it would deny Flores arbitration in any meaningful sense of the word, end quote. So that was one of the last things we'd heard about it in the public eye for quite some time. Because the NFL, again, when it comes to cases like this, they want and would prefer to handle this quietly. Again, with recently covering the Rooney Rule, there could be smoke where there's fire in regards to potential discrimination in the league when it comes to the coaching discrepancy and things of that nature. But they would much rather keep that under wraps for as long as they possibly can. And even in previous situations, I've talked about how they've gone about, some of their other cases. For example, the Al Davis situation where he actually took them to court and won. One of the worst possible things they could have had happen in that situation, because they had to take everything into an open court, and somehow, someway, Al Davis found a way to get a crucial win in that case. Plus, recently as well, even more so than this Brian Flores case, and under completely different circumstances, Jon Gruden got a similar kind of victory when it came to having his case against the NFL proceed in open court around, I think that was reported in November. So there's a pattern there when it comes to them trying to just conceal all of this information and all of this documentation from the view of the public. But, unfortunately for them, a similar trend would happen in regards to this Brian Flores case, as Valerie Caproni in this particular court would allow them to proceed moving forward in a completely open manner. As this quote from the AP states, the Brian Flores-led discrimination lawsuit against the NFL can proceed to open court and avoid the league's arbitration process, a federal judge ruled Friday. The NFL argued Flores should go through the league's arbitration process rather than the legal system, but Judge Valerie Caproni of the Southern District of New York sided with the plaintiffs. Oh, co-plaintiffs then. Okay. The court's decision recognizes that an arbitration forum in which the defendant's own chief executive gets to decide the case with strip employees of their rights under the law. Flores' attorneys Douglas H. Wigder and David E. Gottlieb said in a statement, "It is long overdue for the NFL to recognize this and finally provide a fair, neutral, and transparent forum for these issues to be addressed." End quote. And that quote right there honestly tells you a lot. Their arbitration process with Roger Goodell overseeing it has come under fire for quite some time now, because when you do think about it, it is suspicious. There have been other situations where this has been brought up about the NFL trying to utilize arbitration, and you have people on the opposing end citing a potential conflict of interest in regards to that. And it makes sense. The brother is literally the commissioner of the NFL. How are you then going to try to be the jury and executioner in a particular case as well in one fell swoop? That's just highly, highly suspicious to, consider. And then actually dealing with it as well. You could really just imagine how many cases have been shut down by that without hesitation. Even when you take into account a conflict of interest or motives. It's just not an optimal situation to be in. But man, there are a number of things that do go against it. As this USA Today article continues to further state here, quote, via Caproni, the Second Circuit concluded that Flores' agreement to submit his claims to the discretion of the designated arbitrator, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, provides for arbitration in name only, and accordingly lacks the protection of the FAA, Caproni wrote. The agreement is therefore unenforceable because it fails to guarantee that Flores can vindicate his statutory cause of action in an arbitral forum. And the ruling found that the NFL's dispute resolution procedural guidelines are not an applicable way to settle this dispute. The court disagreed with the franchise's argument that the DRPG had satisfactory procedures in place for resolution through arbitration. End quote. I mean, that, in a way, because, I think I cited that originally, even when we get back to talking about the last particular update on this case. In name only, and not genuinely being executed in that situation. Well, isn't that the same damn thing that this lawsuit is alluding to when it comes to the practices of these coaching interviews in these different cycles? In theory, to meet the standard requirements, we're going to get these interviews out of the way, but we actually have no interest in hiring you. We're just trying to check off the boxes that we need to check off so we can get our preferred guy. Same exact thing that they're claiming. So that would just double down on it. And so from that standpoint, you can understand exactly why Caproni would rule in the way that she chose to. Genuinely. It is the same damn mindset that they are trying to, call out fully in a court of law to have the NFL eventually admit that they are at a fault and are in the wrong for this discrepancy and take ownership and accountability for it. That's really what this comes down to at the end of the day. Like, sure, if there is like potential money and damages, whatever, this is not why Flores or either of the two coaches decided to jump onto this case. Like, no, they are trying to prove a point and send a message, set a precedent even, for, further coaching cycles down the line to wholeheartedly include and give space for black coaches to try to make a mark in the league. That's the premise of this case. So, like, I don't know. It was just because I'm looking at, like, one of the other things on ESPN, even though it was, like, something totally different, and they just kind of said the same stuff, repeating some of the other articles that I'd already gone through. You can apparently react to these, and I saw some laughing emojis. I'm like, you think they're taking this as a joke? Okay, if they get the proper evidence out here, then the NFL is definitely in hot water. So it's like, okay, now we're in this situation if we're the league. What exactly is their next move? Only time will tell, to be honest with you. But the fact that they already are in a situation where they have to confront this, it's huge for all three of the coaches involved here and anybody else on the plaintiff side. As this USA Today article states, a pretrial conference is set for Friday, April 3rd. So definitely be tuned into that, save that date, and we will definitely be looking into what happens there. Now again, it's probably not going to be resolved. It's going to take some time. It has already been a few years to this point. And this is the first time in quite some time that they're actually getting some traction on this. Do with that fact what you will, but you have to start from somewhere. And that is a massive swing to get the ball rolling for them. 100%. All right, to move on from that. The Giants would hire Brian Callahan as passing game coordinator. Now, there are multiple ways to think about this. On the one hand, we understand who Brian Callahan is, right? We understand who he is. The fact that you have this man as a person who was the interim head coach, then turned into a head coach magically for some reason, and then called plays for not even a full season with the Titans team, okay, and leading them to be one of the worst offenses, I should say, period, in the NFL. And this was last season. And they expect him to come in and completely turn around the Giants' offense. Like, at face value, you're looking at this and you're saying they downgraded. The only way to go is up in the Giants situation, but at the same time, your offense was actually elite last season. And you bring in a guy to handle the passing game duty who could not even muster up enough offense to compete on a week-to-week basis, leading this damn Titan squad. That shit is crazy. Like, let's have a look-see at this shit, man, because there's no way. I don't know what went into this decision from the Giants, quite frankly. Like, let me see. Like, bruh. Okay, so, yeah, didn't even make it through the first half of the season, quite frankly. appeared in just 6 games as a head coach. And let's have a look at these 6 games. Because if he's going to be handling passing game duties, then we may as well take a look at how that passing offense performed in that time. To be fair. So let's see this. Right? In the first 6 games of the season, the new passing game coordinator for the Giants and Brian Callahan did not oversee any 300-yard performance with the team. Now again, 300 yards is still something that can be hard to reach, generally speaking. But when you look at it, the only game where he mustered up a 200-yard passing performance or more was that fateful day where Amari DeMercado decided to impersonate a dumbass. And the Cardinals imploded for what would be a Titans victory in that game where Cam Ward threw for 249 passing yards. That was the only one. Every other game reads 62 passing yards against the Broncos, 143 against the Rams, 196 against the Colts, 93 against the Texans, and 160 against the Raiders. But he's your passing game coordinator. Okay. What the hell? That shit is crazy when you think about it. On the other hand, to be fair, to be objective, even with seeing him struggle with Cam Ward in his first season, being a rookie, Jackson Dart has the potential and clearly has a system around him to take a step forward. It's really just going to be about how he protects himself as a runner and takes more strides as a passer. The entire Giants staff, even if you want to say that their offense was fine, they clearly had to bring in an entirely new regime. And while you trust that from a mental standpoint, from a maturity standpoint, Harbaugh can definitely get Jackson Dart on the right track there, he's not going to be able to relate to Jackson Dart much as an offensive mind like Brian Callahan could in theory. Now again, there were seasons where he was much better as an offensive coordinator. So there's always a chance that he can regain that kind of luster in this spot. It's not like that just completely leaves you if you are in Brian Callahan's shoes. And plus, when it comes to the passing game, specifically with New York, injuries aside, and even without, you just completely taking away the injuries, they have a much stronger core of skill players than do the Titans. It goes without saying at this point. And to think that in the draft, they have an opportunity to add to that if they so choose. Although some people suggest that it might be better for them to take a lineman first with their first pick on the board. Because you need quite a lot. You go lineman, they need a defensive back. Probably a corner. Probably. No bullshit. So you need a whole hell of a lot as it is. There. But offensively you're set. And there are a lot of different moving pieces for Callahan to deploy. And that could turn it into something special. So I'll be fair. I can't completely shut it down. Like, Callahan could be on a little redemption tour. But we will see, man. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's going to be interesting, to say the least. And honestly, that's the best I can give you right now. I could do much worse talking about Brian Callahan. But I am definitely intrigued to see what he can do with this Giants squad and with Jackson Dart. Because that is going to be incredibly important. Like, Harbaugh, again, as a more rigid, traditional head coach, he's not going to be able to relate to him as an offensive mind. Like Brian Daboll probably could, but again, the skill set with him is like, the consistency with him, I don't know. Callahan might be in a similar trajectory, but again, with a new regime, with a brand new coaching staff overall, it is worth the shot. They better hope this works. They better hope this shit works, man. Oh my gosh. Like, goodness gracious. I'll tell you, man. Hey, bro. Okay, the Pats would elevate former defensive coordinator Terrell Williams to a higher-ranking role in the organization, while also promoting eventually, per Adam Schefter, and most of these news are per Adam Schefter or a different news source relating to some of the other topics here. They would promote Zak Kuhr to the full-time defensive coordinator spot. Now, you understand both very well. I mean, the fact that Williams is even still around after dealing with prostate cancer in the offseason, overcoming it, and then just, really trying to keep himself in a state of peace and rest at that point. Like, you can't assume a correlation between, dealing with the day-to-day operations of a coach or coordinator in the league to his cancer or anything like that. That would be a massive stretch. But after dealing with all of what goes into that treatment for months on end, when it was mentioned, like, prior to the Super Bowl, that he wasn't going to take on that defensive coordinator role again, you could understand where he's coming from at that point. He's still a highly valued member of the Patriots organization, and that's why they're making the decision to say, okay, you can still have a job here. We're still going to have you around. The players want to have you around. And as a person to speak with, obviously connect with, like, that's not something that's going to go away just because he's no longer out there on the field with them physically. They're always going to see him around in the general office and areas of that nature. But obviously, with losing your long-tenured defensive coordinator in that kind of way, you had to have an alternative or some sort of contingency plan. And quite frankly, at the beginning of the season, once that initial report came out, it was so sudden that it didn't really feel as if you had a backup plan in place at all, because you were not expecting Terrell Williams to confront something like that at that particular time. So they had to get creative and they had to try something. And lo and behold, throughout the season, Zak Kuhr proved himself to be a pretty damn good defensive coordinator, I'll say. Pretty damn good. And while his name had probably gone under the radar for a little while, especially with the Patriots not being as good defensively in the regular season, when that fucking postseason came around, I think the tide started to shift tremendously in terms of his worth to this organization when it came to him being a defensive mind. I'm not going to lie to you. once that playoff run got started for the Patriots, and they just started clamping up everybody, the fact that they were literally allowing just 6.4 points a fucking game or something like that. Or a very low number of points, I should say, yeah. Yeah, around 6.4 points per game to that point. Rivaling that of the 2000 Ravens defense in the postseason. You understood that it was legit. The way the league is today, with as much talent as there is all over the place, it's like naturally you can have some elite defenses that stand out, like the Broncos, like the Seahawks, like the Texans in the regular season, especially when it comes to a points per game distribution. But stops are going to be harder to come by, especially in the regular season when you aren't trying as much to make it a point, frankly, to derail the opposition completely on that front of the ball. But in the postseason, when he had to elevate his play on that side and when he needed players to step it up, man, they more than came through. Even with the loss in the Super Bowl being a bit anticlimactic for them, I can say that Zak Kuhr coached a hell of a fucking game defensively. Because I saw some stuff saying that, hey, the Seahawks didn't have to do as much. And in a way, they didn't, because of how much better the Seahawks were playing by keeping them out of the red zone completely. But the Patriots were doing just as well defensively, even if they were down 12-0 and then 19-0 at that point. They were getting after it. They were making Sam Darnold uncomfortable. They were getting some pressures. They just weren't getting home all that much. And obviously the back half was flying all over the place, whether it was Carlton Davis III, whether it was Craig Woodson, and whether it was Christian Gonzalez, putting together a damn near Super Bowl MVP caliber performance if the Patriots would have won this game. That's how good Kerr had those guys playing. And if you're the Patriots in that situation, you have no doubt in your mind that he can replicate this again. Because, when he needed to show up for real, he put it all out there. And it was something that no team in the playoffs that they faced off against could really solve. That is the essence of a defensive-minded head coach. Kerr's probably a lot younger at this point. And from, being unsure of a potential replacement to now having one flourish in your own system, that shit felt like a no-brainer for New England. And I can agree. It's a well-deserved job for a man of his, caliber to rise up the ranks like that within the organization and find that kind of promotion. That's definitely something to look forward to next season if you are a Pats fan. He might be incredibly legitimate as a defensive coordinator. The Bills would hire John Fox as senior assistant coach. He is a name that I have not heard in a while, but John Fox, you know anything about him, and it feels like with the kind of experience that he's had as a general contributor in the NFL, although he has not coached in about 8 years to this point, as an assistant and as a potential mentor to a first-timer in Joe Brady, I can understand why the Bills would make that move. You see that kind of label, and it does kind of align with advisory roles. John Fox has been through the ringer. He's seen teams go through the highest of highs. Hell, even making a pair of Super Bowl appearances, ultimately not winning either one. He lost to the Patriots that year in 2003. And then in 2013, you know what happened. With the Seahawks getting their first Super Bowl win in franchise history, just dominating them completely. But he's seen the highest of highs with multiple 12-plus win seasons. He's also been through the lowest of low, being as bad as 2-14 with the Panthers in 2010, and also finishing out his career with a lackluster 3-year stretch with the Bears from 2015 to 2017, where he had a 14-34 record. This is probably another guy who's a bit more traditional in nature. And pairing up an offensive mind in Brady with a guy who started out as defensive coordinator all the way back in 1994 before getting his first head coaching gig in 2002 with Carolina. It's definitely a complementary piece of good quality to have alongside you. And I have no problem with that whatsoever when you're looking at it that way. For just trade-off of moves involving both the Seahawks and the Raiders. And honestly, this can just be one particular segment that I'll just note here for developments in the video. Because all these in some way, shape, or form, aside from maybe one, are related. For one, the Seahawks would hire former Ravens defensive coordinator Zach Orr as an inside linebackers coach. Perfect. The second I saw that come from Adam Schefter, I'm like, yeah, that's fucking perfect, bro. Exceptional. I mean, there aren't too many other options out there that you could have gotten in a better situation than this. Obviously, Zach Orr has been marked, honestly, over the last couple of seasons for his slow starts and strong finishes with the Ravens defense over the past couple of years. But overall, the quality of those defenses has been much maligned in the media, across, the perspective of different pundits, and especially Ravens brass. It has not been the prettiest kind of tour for him. And again, to this point, prior to this piece of news, you hadn't really heard much of him being ousted from the job or anything like that. They didn't make any particular move to re-sign him, but there also wasn't any allusion to him leaving at all. Well, that would be your introduction to that development right there. But it's ideal. I mean, granted, when you think about the Seahawks roster right now, their current inside linebacker would probably be some combo, honestly, I can just check the depth chart to make sure of it, because obviously you'd think Ernest Jones would play that position. At times they've called him an off-ball linebacker, but I can just check to confirm that. They have Ernest Jones IV and Chaz Surratt as fully interior linebackers on this roster. I would think that Drake Thomas has played that from time to time, but not completely. They have him listed as a Sam. So already with that brother right there, Ernest Jones IV, just notched his second Super Bowl ring, and holding down the middle like that, you had a guy in Zach Orr who played that very same position in Baltimore for years and was definitely a solid interior linebacker force before having his career end in an untimely manner due to injuries. Like, he knows that position like the back of his hand. And Ernest Jones IV is already a guy who's asserted himself as one of the best in the league at that particular position. Like, to have him as a position coach in that respect could be the best fit for him as a person trying to make it forward in this league on the coaching staff. So I definitely love that. The Raiders would make a pair of moves themselves as they would promote Rob Leonard to defensive coordinator. But they would also hire away former Seahawks quarterbacks coach Andrew Janocko and poach him with the Clint Kubiak tax to Las Vegas, making him their new offensive coordinator, probably in name only. Kubiak, again, was calling the plays in Seattle, so I would have to believe that that could carry over. Obviously, Janocko is going to have some influence there, but Kubiak's probably going to be the main guy. Nonetheless, the Raiders are in a similar spot, honestly, with what I was alluding to with the Giants. Not exactly. They're going with a younger head coaching prospect in Clint Kubiak here compared to Harbaugh, but with you looking for a complete and total change to revamp your entire coaching staff, to take a chance on younger offensive coordinators that have not gotten these positions before or haven't really gotten the grandest of opportunities to carve out a name for themselves in the league, a chance to shine, that definitely says a lot about where their headspace is at. The key to everything for the Raiders is actually proving that they are on course to win and fucking compete. And they're going to need it. Like, these are a couple of solid moves for them to have here. But Max Crosby is still, that's still not a guarantee. And apparently there were, reports stating that Spytek, the GM, wanted him back, but kept the door open for a trade. So, you still have some work to do. But, again, baby steps. Like, these are solid moves to at least get everything started. And then the Seahawks, in response to that, would hire former 49ers tight ends coach Brian Fleury as offensive coordinator. Now, again, as I said then and as I still stand by now, I'm not all that familiar with what his system would actually look like. Again, coming from being a position coach to now holding down the offensive coordinator spot. It's also pretty bold that you look to the damn 49ers staff, fuck the 49ers, to go poach a guy to replace Janocko for this position. It's definitely bold, but at the same time, Mike McDonald has proven that he understands what the hell he's doing. John Schneider is more than proven that he understands what the fuck he's doing. And with, having that position be supervised over the years, with however long Brian Fleury was there, you're telling me this man oversaw everything that George Kittle was doing. Obviously, for him to be one of the best tight ends in the game, point blank, period, right now. And I'm thinking to myself in that moment, man, AJ Barner about to go fucking dumb. The man already had himself a year last year where he was one of the better all-around tight ends in the NFL. Could literally do everything. Between being a possession guy, between getting vertical, between the blocking in the pass game, in the run game, the short routes, intermediate routes, just being a reliable catcher, and also, again, situationally, when it comes to the few rushes that he had throughout the year, consistently picking up first downs. 9 of his 10 carries resulted in first down gains on the year. He's just an all-around fucking weapon. And he's only, and will enter the season at 24 years old. Like, he's just getting started. It's fucking crazy. He obviously took those strides this year. And I mean, bro, like, if Fleury can work that magic again, you are about to see A.J. Barner elevate even more. And it's not just him. It's working with a tight end room that can be as versatile as you need them to be. Because we're saying all this about Barner, like Arroyo also doesn't possess a hell of a fucking skill set as a player coming out of Miami. And he definitely had himself a few solid games this season. Wasn't able to, appear in every one due mostly to injury. But boy, man, that is going to be a hell of a tight end room to work with. And from that aspect, if nothing else, I can't wait to see what Brian Fleury does with those guys from there. Because my goodness, that is going to be something special. Okay. So, to move on from that into some news here, as the former commander in Tre Johnson, per Adam Schefter and other sources, would pass away at the age of 54. From everything that I have been seeing, although I still, had to look through everything a little more, essentially, they stated that this happened during a family trip for Johnson. And again, while I don't have all the details on that, it's definitely tough to hear about. And then, have something like that potentially go down in a situation where you're around those who you care for the most. I can't really speculate as to what exactly went down, but it's definitely a tragedy, and considering where Commanders fans' heads are at, it wasn't that far ago, or that long ago, I should say, where I reported on Wilburn's passing in an unfortunate fire that happened in his complex and trapped him inside his apartment. So he already had that happen earlier on, and then now hearing about this, just a little bit of time afterwards, that is going to be tough for people to stomach for a while. But obviously, as more developments come out about it, there are going to be even more things to potentially report. I don't want to play the speculation game. But, man, it's definitely just like, okay, if you're on a family trip with these people, I don't even know how something like that goes down. Definitely something that could be seen as sudden. And you just hope that relatives of his right now are, like, still, obviously trying to handle this in the best way that they can. It's going to be hard. But, man. Alright, moving on to the Dolphins. And for them, with them being one of the main teams here to try to work to free up cap space and room, they would go on a cost-cutting spree of epic proportions. They shopped 4 players and released them all, including the likes of Tyreek Hill, Bradley Chubb, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, and James Daniels. And just like that, things have become even more risque in Miami. You weren't expecting Westbrook-Ikhine to do much as it was, and James Daniels, as was shown with some of the other things that I was watching on this at the time, has sound as James Daniels can be as a guard, he only appeared in a single game last season and was mostly injured. So from that standpoint, Daniels may be the most understandable guy out of this that was released. It's unfortunate for him as a player who can produce at a relatively good level. Like, it's not like he's an elite offensive guard, but he's serviceable enough to get the job done. And he's not even going to be able to, really commit all that to the Dolphins after having appeared in just a single game and then getting released afterwards. And Westbrook-Ikhine as well was another recent free agent signing for them that didn't really contribute all that much. Like, just to look into it really quickly, for Westbrook-Ikhine last season, like, it was almost as if he was non-existent. Like, just consider this for a second. Please consider this. He appeared in all 15 games, okay? But in those 15 games, he started in just 3 and had 11 receptions for 89 yards. 11 receptions for 89 yards. He wasn't even really a part of the offense at that point. So there was no reason at that point for the Dolphins to extend him for any further than that. What exactly are you getting out of that deal? Not much, genuinely. There's no point. But when it comes to Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb, man, on opposite sides of the ball, those guys are supposed to be staples of the organization for the long term. And, Chubb as well was, definitely putting together some solid seasons. So the fact that he had to end up in this situation, even if it might be for cost-cutting reasons, is just completely tough. Now, from Tyreek Hill's standpoint, when looking at it that way, it's almost as if, the writing might have been on the wall at some point. Because with what he'd been facing over the last couple of seasons, I just don't know if there would have been a market for him in regards to a trade. Or at least a good enough one where you could ensure that you were getting a solid return on your investment. And I can't guarantee that between the injuries, between the regression in play, and between the regression in, physical attributes, it's been a lot rougher for him to make his mark on the Dolphins squad over the past couple of seasons. So to have that kind of outpour of support is definitely huge for him. But if you were not really all that, connected in the first place, they probably had no other choice. Because Tyreek Hill, admittedly, when all that stuff came out about him to wanting to be traded and wanting to take his career in a different direction, literally after that Jets game in 24 to close out that particular season, he did himself no favors. The entire offseason of, just trying to shit on them whenever he had the chance, and then obviously, tending to other matters here, all that stuff wears down on you at that point. And it's like, okay, he's here, but obviously when the going gets tough, they clearly have a disconnect there. And Tyreek Hill, with him getting injured due to an ACL tear last season, that might have been the icing on the cake right there. The problem wasn't necessarily resolved yet, but they were trying to work towards it. They were trying to get their chemistry back on track, and nothing was genuinely working in that situation. Then you get that injury, and now you don't even have your best asset out there. And of course, they fall on that huge slot to start out the season before trying to claw their ways back into it and then ultimately falling again to finish things out. That was the cycle for the Dolphins. Like, as good as Tyreek Hill had been, especially to start out as tenure there, as good as Bradley Chubb had been, and as enticing as those two free agents were, as constructed, that roster clearly was not good enough to really get much of anywhere. They were right in that line of mediocrity, and they had virtually not many ways out, especially with the limited cap space that they had and the amount of money that they still owe to a Tagovailoa at this point. Now, it all ties back to him in a way, and there is a belief that he could also be gone. His salary is enormous. His cap hit is deadly, especially if he is not traded by a specific deadline. It'll increase, in fact, by millions upon millions of dollars. So, if there were a team in the running to try to trade for him, any team would have to be knowledgeable about that before considering a move. And, even with those guys, those Packers boys, trying to make it look and seem as if Tua Tagovailoa still has a chance, between all the stuff that he said, between the constant non-action in the offseason, and between a general breakdown, I just do not think that they are willing to keep him. They have not, publicly stated that at all. If they really wanted to, it would have been one of the first things that you'd heard out of their mouths. In fact, not even close. So, man, if I were Tagovailoa in this situation, I'd be prepared just a little bit. You can't be thinking about that stuff too much, but it's like, dude, oh man, they want you gone, brother. They want you gone. So you have got to figure that out. I tell you. All right, the Browns would hire Mike Rutenberg as their new defensive coordinator after the departure and resignation from Jim Schwartz. Again, the defense will more than likely remain the damn same, especially if you have similar personnel there. But, again, you just can't help but wonder about that being a tough loss for the Browns to have in that situation. And it was controllable. It was preventable. But, that entire organization is dysfunction personified. So, you couldn't really have expected anything different from them. That being said, there would be a situation involving a different Brown that could have been a very, could have been a danger for sure. Fortunately, he is detailed to be fine now. But per an initial report from ESPN, Cleveland Browns safety Ronnie Hickman was assaulted in the lobby of a New York City hotel early Monday morning, the team said, end quote. And that would be on the 16th, not the most recent Monday, of course. And then I'm seeing that, I'm like, okay, what the hell happened to Ronnie Hickman? And then I'm looking at the initial post, and I'm all around like, whoa, okay, this is going to need some context, to say the least. First of all, though, from a general perspective, why is something always going down with athletes in New York City? This is now the second time, and probably even more so, that we don't always hear about in the public eye, right? Wasn't the special teamer for the Jets and Chris Boyd just in a situation where somebody approached him at a restaurant like an Asian fusion spot in the Manhattan area, and an argument ensued before he was subject to shots and taken to the hospital, where he had to spend time recovering from there and eventually missed the entirety of the regular season with that. That recently happened. And now you're in another situation where a different player is having to deal with the same thing. And Hickman, as they say here, is from New Jersey. He's from the area. And he has to come essentially near home to deal with that. This shit is crazy. For some more context, though, quote per USA Today states, according to the Post report, Hickman was approached by 4 individuals around 4:30 a.m. in the lobby of the 60 LES Hotel on Allen Street on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. A dispute broke out between the 24-year-old former Ohio State Buckeye and the 4 individuals. The Post reported the suspects slugged Hickman and took off, while Hickman was then transported to Bellevue Hospital, where he was treated for the injuries. The outlet also said the police are investigating whether Hickman's status as an NFL player played a role in the incident. And honestly, when it comes to that, those are the questions that you always have to ask yourself in a situation like this. If I remember correctly, I don't believe that the Chris Boyd situation came down to that. It was just a general argument that escalated. And, I mean, it's likely for Hickman. I mean, who knows? Like, being from the area, being around, being a prominent figure in that space, it might be easy for some people to spot him or recognize him as he's moving around on the street. That doesn't mean that you approach him in such a way to maybe try to force something out of him, and if he doesn't give it to you, then, oh, okay, we have to do this and that. Like, no, that's not how this works. And that's kind of what the Boyd situation ended up coming down to as well. You're trying to take things away from him, and he's not budging, and then that's when you decide to just let off rounds. Like, why exactly? I'll never really be able to understand something like that. But I digress. Let me see. Yeah, they are still conducting the search per ABC 7, a New York-based station. And it was the same way with Boyd, but man, to be dealing with that in that situation, like, you're just, again, it's that early in the morning, you're just trying to chill out and do your own thing, and you have to confront some stuff like that. Again, more context is going to be everything, but at that point, like, what the hell are you doing at that point? Now, again, I can't really assume what it was that Hickman might have been doing at that time in the morning. But at the same time, unless it's something potentially intimate, I don't believe that he would want to be surrounded by 4 individuals randomly, whether they knew who he was or not. I don't think he'd want to be surrounded by them at 4:30 in the morning. I'd be remiss to believe that shit. Like, there've got to be some boundaries here. I like, any number of things could happen. They could have genuinely had bad intentions. They might have been trying to ask for some form of a photo or an autograph or so on and so forth. Any number of things could have happened here. But why bother engaging that early? Like, just give it some time. You're in no rush. And then, again, just because you might not have gotten your own way in this, now you're going to decide to try to piece him up? Like, what? Doesn't really make any sense at all. Genuinely. It's ridiculous. Okay. we have a retirement update as Robert Woods, the former Rams and Bills wide receiver, would retire from the NFL after 13 seasons. Robert Woods will most certainly go down as a guy who was always a good wide receiver. By no means was he really the fastest guy, but at the same time, he had some pretty good football IQ. And situationally, you could line him up pretty much anywhere and he'd have a solution every fucking time, seemingly. I mean, as a Seahawks fan, I understood, okay? I mean, dude, with him in that early Sean McVay offense, the amount of times he was essentially just trying to be a possession wide receiver down the field and also taking a few gadget plays from time to time, being a bit of a running back for a few seasons in a row for them, putting up a few 100 rushing yard seasons in a row. He was just an all-around force. The man had 2 1,000-yard seasons in his career, back-to-back years, coinciding with the time where Todd Gurley II was lining it up as an all-around player himself. Like, that early McVay offense was legitimately elite, and there was no way of truly stopping it unless you were Bill Belichick in the fucking Super Bowl. At the very least, Robert Woods, I'm tripping. He was able to get it just before he ended up leaving. Now, he didn't play in that particular playoff run. I would have to believe it was due to injury. And honestly, after that, in 2021, he really tailed off in his career and out of the league, genuinely speaking. To this point, he hadn't played in about a couple of years. He was last with the Texans in 2024, and he'd recently signed a one-day contract per Adam Schefter with the Rams to retire as one, and officially call it a career there. But man, what an interesting career it was. He'll finish with 8,233 yards, 38 touchdowns, and also 5 rushing touchdowns with 514 yards on 75 carries. Like, what? That shit's crazy. There's no way that something like that would even be possible. But he was kind of the tone setter in a way. Although he's a bit smaller. And honestly, you could say that he was probably not as athletic himself. When you look at what Puka Nacua is doing in this McVay offense, Robert Woods was the predecessor. Robert Woods was the predecessor when it came to, again, making those possession catches, being completely smart with his route running, and, having a lot of good technique as well to get himself open and get himself down to secure these catches, maintaining sure hands, and obviously being an all-around force to be moved and deployed around the field and be willing to be utilized in that way. Robert Woods did that first, and now Puka Nacua appears to be following that same sort of trend, obviously being a probably better player at this point. But that was the influence. That was the standard right there. And if, you're not going to give Robert Woods his flowers for anything else, you have to at the very least understand that he set the stage for the young lad. And now look at what Puka Nacua is doing. Just have to say that, of course. the 49ers would hire former Northern Illinois head coach Thomas Hammock as a running back coach and senior offensive assistant, which can also be interesting. Now, in terms of the man himself, admittedly, since the sequence of time following his massive upset of a highly ranked Notre Dame team in 2024, I hadn't heard much surrounding his name specifically. But looking at the Northern Illinois team, I believe that I'd recently covered them when addressing the transfer portal and things like that. I, if I'm not mistaken, believe that they had a solid rushing offense this season. But I can obviously check to make sure. Because as a running backs coach, with the way that Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet have already been utilized, that shit is already good. Already. So that goes without saying. And yes, looking at it, their team, with him being in a case where they had a bot committee system with Shavon Wright and Tre Johnson Jr. in that backfield to go along with the rushing quarterback as well, they had 2,245 yards as a team in terms of rushing on the season, on 4.5 yards per carry. Now, again, with me covering them in that transfer portal video, it was the only strength that they had. They couldn't throw the ball for shit. Maybe they refused to, but they really couldn't. I'm looking at, again, 4 quarterbacks, as I said in that particular video, combining for 1,186 yards on 52.9 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. You couldn't throw the fucking ball to help yourself at all. That was the only strength they had in their offense, was the rushing attack, and they made good on that, to say the least, despite just, being atrocious as a result of that poor play. It's interesting to have these people come in as, position coaches, or have experienced as position coaches, and get spots on the pro teams like this, with coordinator positions and other position coaching assignments. Fleury's already holding down the passing attack potentially. So to have Thomas Hammock back there working on everything that goes down in the backfield, that's going to make things even better. Even better. Definitely an interesting one to have. And, we'll definitely be tuning in to Seahawks games, obviously, to see how that looks. We'll be also, having to check at that point because, again, Hammock, the season was lackluster, but, again, that was and stands as Northern Illinois' biggest win in school history. And regardless of what you think of him as a coach, whatever you think of his personality, that's not something that you're going to take away from him anytime soon. That's going to stand the test of time. But yeah, you gotta find a way to regroup if you are in Northern Illinois. I mean, there has to be another head coach that they're looking into. There has to be. The Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, per Adam Schefter, at some point last week, would restructure the previous 10-year, $450 million bomb that set off a chain reaction of mega contracts for these quarterbacks in the NFL. And again, Mahomes, to this point, that contract has been well-deserved, despite him having probably his worst season last year. Not even just by the overall numbers of having 22 touchdowns and 11 interceptions or something like that, but the fact that he went multiple games with sub 50% completion, he went multiple games with multiple picks and no touchdowns. That's how drastic it was getting for somebody as great as Mahomes still projects to be in spite of all of it. But clearly, there had to be a change. Like, at that point, the entirety of the team, especially offensively, they needed some retooling. And by that point, they didn't have enough room to really make anything else work or fit anything else into the budget to go out there and get some other guys or get some, different coaching positions open up for other people aside from them getting Bieniemy in the offseason to this point. But that would all change once this contract was restructured, because they would detail that the Chiefs, by doing this, freed up $43.56 million in cap space, and it gives them over $50+ million to use in free agency. And things just got a little fucking interesting for Kansas City. And what everybody thought was a down year, where they needed to just drag everything through the mud and cast it out. It's like, no, hold on. We have an opportunity to still remain competitive while potentially hitting on our draft picks and potentially getting a couple solid players out of free agency. That carries a ton of fucking weight. And, with it coming out that Tyreek Hill had been released, some people have alluded to Tyreek Hill potentially coming back to the Chiefs on a short-term deal, which honestly would make more and more sense. Now, again, I don't believe that opening is what caused the Chiefs to completely retool this entire thing. I do believe that they could get him back, though. I will definitely stand on that. I do think that they can reacquire him. So we'll definitely see what goes on with that. It's definitely interesting. They have a lot of different players they could go after. You could get, honestly, with the amount of money you have, at least one premier free agent. At least one. And, again, depending on how they handle everything else, once more, they land on that particular player or players, boy, Chiefs gonna be right back in the conversation. Right back in the conversation. And that's something that most teams around the NFL do not want to deal with. Not in the slightest. Alright, let me see. Neal Dahlen, who passed away at the age of 85. He was a former 49ers and Broncos executive, and they even had him, participating in a number of different things. Obviously, they say here he was a part of 7 Super Bowl winning teams, and he'd been through a number of different eras with those respective teams. Definitely a contributor, especially to those Broncos squads, that is going to be well renowned forever. And again, when it comes to other guys outside of that, man, you're going to have a bunch of other connections here, whether it be family, whether it be friends, trying to account for that news in a reasonable manner themselves. It is once more rough to try to take in. But I'm sure that he has gotten the respect that he deserves as a contributor in this space, and I would hope so. And if that stands, then, obviously you have to do what you have to do if you are trying to go through the grieving process. But man, to live for that long, doing exactly what you love to do and having an impact on pretty much everybody that you worked alongside, man, that's definitely special, to say the least. Man, to briefly pivot from that before entering back into a different conversation here. While I have not personally looked into everything myself on this overall matter, I have watched a few things on this in regards to whatever the fuck is going on with Rashee Rice. Whatever the fuck is going on. All I gotta say is, come the fuck on. Just come on. I just handle this kind of conversation, this caliber conversation, with Darren Lee and James Pierce Jr. in my last recap. And if everything that is coming out of this overall Rashee Rice situation is proved to be true, like, what the hell is going on? I would hope that it's not. And again, in that situation, the NFL is already looking to probe their own investigation into this as well. Now, they could do a similar thing because to this point, we still haven't heard much out of the Stephon Diggs case in terms of a verdict or anything like that. They could let this carry over. They could try to handle this now. Or they could say nothing about it, remain mum about it. Which, again, varies. Like, the NFL has been inconsistent in enforcing these kinds of policies in regards to these situations. So, only time will tell what happens with that. But Rashee Rice, man, you just gotta, like... The man had the gall, apparently, to... get on social media and make all these different posts. You're throwing up a middle finger with your girlfriend while actively dealing with cases that are going to completely incriminate you and paint you out to be one of the worst possible human beings if these allegations are true. I mean, literally, there are allegations about him. I can't even really say it like that, but you're doing that kind of stuff, okay, to your pregnant girlfriend at the time over the course of an 18-month span, and they have everything documented in that shit from her perspective, from other perspectives, and a wave of other documentation that could turn out to be crucial in regards to this case, implicating him as a proprietor of a lot of fucked up shit. So the buck has to stop somewhere. And that honestly should serve as a message for like anybody in the space generally, man. You are not above the law just because you make NFL money and you play in the league. You're not above it. And you're also not above, in a way, normality. What the fuck are you going around allegedly doing that to your girlfriend for? You think your job in that situation makes you more entitled to get away with that kind of stuff? That's a pretty fucked up way to think. And again, some players probably do think like that. Unfortunately. That has got to change. Because the amount of times you're constantly hearing about that shit. It's like, dude, come on, man. What the fuck are we doing? But I digress. To briefly get back into that, it also mentioned that former Steelers player, safety I believe, Mike Wagner, would pass away at the age of 76 on February 18th. Just terribly unfortunate stuff all around. One of the more accomplished safeties of his generation, as this NFL article would essentially allude to. And obviously being a part of that defense in the 1970s with the Steelers, That's definitely going to make you an overall icon in that city, amongst the fans, etc. So I know, again, there's still an outpour for that. Those guys are still hurting there. But it's like, geez, man. I mean, my goodness, bro. And I came across a different post as well on Instagram, like also trying to honor him as well. Like, jeez. Man. And to think about it that way, that ain't even the hard, like, it's not a competition, but man, that would not be the very last one of this particular cycle of developments. Again, it is inevitable in a way, but it's like, this next one, dude, goodness gracious. We have some time before we get into that, though, because now we have to provide an even deeper follow-up to a different situation. To sum it up very briefly, I'll say, for a good amount of time now, the Bears have essentially been looking for a new stadium, whether that be in Chicago or whether that be out of state. They've preferred Chicago. In fact, in December, they were proposing a fucking bill of over $855 million in public funding for a stadium and other amenities surrounding it. That's expensive as shit. But there hadn't been any traction on that for a while. So, okay, a few months progressed from that. And with there still not being much overall attention on that, Indiana decides to jump into the mix because they themselves have been looking for an opportunity, especially in this specific location, to, spur up a redevelopment. Give themselves an opportunity to maximize on some tremendous capital growth and have the Bears enter their state as an NFL team and commodity to allow that public area to invest in. And from that point forward, it has been, honestly, a back and forth battle. Indiana has been trying to push for it, but Chicago has remained bullish. The governors have been talking some spicy shit to each other because, again, at that point, it's like the Pritzker individual, for example, longtime Bears fan. Of course, he's going to want them to stay in Chicago. But Indiana also has their own desires to make a home for this team. And they're willing to do everything, and I mean everything in their power, to see to it that this gets done. So the first piece of a follow-up here would come from them essentially creating an agency, an independent agency that could get it done. As this overall quote states from an NFL.com article, the Chicago Bears' potential move to Indiana took another step forward on last Thursday, when a key committee approved a plan to create an agency that would help get a stadium built. The Indiana House of Representatives Ways and Means Committee passed a bill establishing a Northwest Indiana Stadium Authority to finance, construct, and lease a stadium by a 24-0 margin. And the Bears are looking at a tract of land near Wolf Lake in Hammond, Indiana. The passage of SB 27 would mark the most meaningful step forward in our stadium planning efforts to date, the team said in a statement. We are committed to finishing the remaining site-specific necessary due diligence to support our vision to build a world-class stadium near the Wolf Lake area in Hammond, Indiana, end quote. Damn. So, that escalated very quickly. We went from them, trying to make a good push for it to saying, you know what, no, fuck it, we're going all in. 24-0 margin in that committee for it to get passed over to the Senate, where it would be held for a few days, seeing as, the initial passing took place on the 19th. Undisputed, unresisted, unquestioned vote here. Everybody was on board to have this bill get moved forward. With the Northwest Indiana Stadium Authority, if this is put into law, that's just going to be a brand new program formed as a sort of funnel to get the damn job done. The job that the Bears have been waiting to get done. The job that Arlington Heights could not provide, maybe would not provide in some way, shape, or form, depending on the right person that you ask about this. Well, I digress. That is a major step to take. And again, everybody was on board with this. Every single person. So you know they are not fucking around with this. They aren't. And with Indiana coming out and saying that, could be a great contrast as to how Chicago's been handling this over the years. When you look at everything else the NFL.com article have been saying about it, it essentially goes into some background as well. Like years and years of just back and forth with Arlington Heights. Hell, you go all the way back to September 22 and a quote that I had also stated beforehand in the follow-up to that. Had a $5 billion plan to redevelop this area, and it fell through. It never went down. You trying to get public funding for this. It has not gone down. There's just been a constant back and forth with very little getting done in that regard. And Indiana comes out without even having this stadium in place yet. But they're saying, you know what, we're going to get it done pretty much immediately. We have the method to get it done as swiftly as possible without any backlash, without any resistance, and without all of this fucking back and forth. We're going to streamline the process, and we're going to make it easier on every single party involved in this. And it's like, damn. When you look at it that way, you can't say that the Bears wouldn't be completely enticed by it, especially with them saying here, okay, they did not mention Illinois in their statement. Why would they not do that when it's been their home for essentially the last 105 years and counting? That's fucking crazy. Real stuff. And I mean, it was interesting as well, because as another quote would state here per CBS Sports, the Illinois House Revenue and Finance Committee was set to hold a hearing Thursday for a bill allowing the Bears to negotiate long-term property tax rates with local governing bodies, but it was canceled. Illinois was ready to move this bill forward. After a productive 3-hour meeting yesterday, the Bears leaders requested the Illinois General Assembly pause the hearing to make further tweaks to the bill. Matt Hill, a spokesperson for Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, said, "This morning, we were surprised to see a statement lauding Indiana and ignoring Illinois." Like, oh man, like you just hear it that way and you are just thinking, that shit's so petty. Because, we're talking about this constant back and forth conversation amongst the Illinois guys internally. Well, they were about to have something like that go down again if the House and Revenue Finance Committee was supposed to have a meeting on a bill that they had agreement on and still decided to renege on it, say, we might have a few things in this that we want to revisit. So let's hold this off maybe for a few more days, months, and let's see what transpires from there. All this non-action has just bought Indiana more time to plot their own moves. And it culminated in them doing what they did on Thursday. You're surprised, but again, you're not acting quickly enough for some form of preferred liking in the situation on either side. You're not moving fast enough. It's been 4 years going on, damn near. And you guys have not figured out a good enough compromise. Can you blame Indiana for taking it upon themselves to say, you know what, we have a plan, and we're going to put it forward now, like right now? You can't blame them in that situation. You fucking can't. You're surprised to see a statement lauding Indiana and ignoring Illinois. What did you expect was going to happen? They're getting things done. They're in motion right now like this. They're getting things done. And you're sitting there still trying to review language and material that you had agreement on previously. What the fuck changed in just the last second so suddenly as you're about to have this meeting? You don't think that's going to get frustrating for some people at some point? Especially when you take into account the fact that you are trying to get taxpayers to pay $855 million out of their combined pockets to fund this stadium that you don't know the location of, that you don't have any setup for right now. You have no game plan. You are royally fucked in this situation. You have nothing prepared. And you're shocked to see the Indiana came forth with a statement about this, and they were garnering all the praise. And it really just gets to a point where, again, and I'd said it before, and now this shit has escalated further, as one would have thought when I previously reported on this. This shit is getting petty. These governors in Pritzker and in Braun probably fucking hate each other right now. They probably have so much dislike towards each other right now, there might not be any shoring up about it at this point. And, again, it was held in the Senate for a few days naturally. That is the process. After all, you're going to have to review it. Keep in mind as well that the NFL.com article and the CBS Sports article, as is always the case when this situation is brought up, they have to rehash this point every time. That again, in its 105 plus year existence, the Bears have never owned their own stadium. So to have an opportunity to change that and potentially move in a different state completely, entirely, like it makes for a pretty crazy situation overall. And then we turn things up a notch even further. ESPN, per Courtney Cronin, would report the same thing. So from that standpoint, you have to obviously keep all of that in your mainframe at this point. And this article would also state that their lease at Soldier Field is going to run through 2033, as has been previously cited. So, again, important things to note there. But genuinely, just yesterday, things would turn up a notch. Because the Senate bill would be voted on. And just hear this quote out for a second from Journal Star. As it states, Indiana lawmakers move forward with their end of a proverbial deal to move the Chicago Bears to Hammond, Indiana, passing Senate Bill 27 nearly unanimously in a 95-4 vote Tuesday. The bill outlines the financial incentives and authority to build a stadium in northwest Indiana's Lake County. 95-4 on their end. Like, yeah, you can say what you want about those 4 people voting against it, but it just goes to show you again how on board, how willing, and how in tune everybody in Indiana is in regards to trying to get this done. That is what this shows above everything else in regards to this entire conversation. They get the bill, they hold it in for a few days, they go over language, they go over the financial incentives, and they go over all of the potential benefits. As I said before, you're bringing in a new football stadium to a city like Indiana, or well, a city like Hammond, I should say. It's the 8th most populous city, but it's definitely not a major city in Indiana by comparison. And to bring that kind of team there, the history that you are bringing over, if they actually decide to move forward with this, it's going to change that entire community around. As is the case with any stadium going to a smaller, smaller suburban city. Well, not suburban, more rural, probably, countryside. You're bringing it over to that area. That is going to be absolutely huge for those guys. It is as simple as that. And they understand that. They understand how important that is. Obviously, you could get profit, yes. But still, even if that is the goal, they're in unity for it. They have a general direction of where exactly they're heading. And that is important. I think they mention it in the article as well, so I want to just see real quick here, looking it up. Okay, right. Now, from Soldier Field to Hammond, Indiana, it's essentially around a 30-minute drive. So, it's not like it's that far away. And, as they also state in this article, to keep in mind, quote, an NFL spokesperson told IndyStar in January that under the NFL rules, the Bears hold marketing rights in the area, Chicagoland region, because it is within a 75-mile radius of downtown Chicago, a right that applies to every NFL team, which makes sense. The profits from that standpoint, it would definitely hurt Chicago a little bit. That is one of the founding franchises of the NFL that you're losing out on by having them move to a completely different state, a state that already has a football team in Indianapolis with the Colts. Another storied franchise, which saw, again, the elder Irsay at the time move them over to that city in the middle of the night from Baltimore. But hey, do with that what you will. That is always how you have to look at things when you get it down to the sense of general broadcasting, and now with streaming services and everything like that, you're definitely going to want to have an idea as to how that will affect viewership in the Chicago area. And honestly, if it's still within 30 minutes or so away, there isn't really going to be too much of an impact unless you're on the complete outskirts of the Illinois area and a lot further away from Chicago. Outside of that, most other people would probably be somewhat fine in that regard. Although, obviously, when you look at the fans, when you look at Kevin Warren's statement that he had in his open letter, which I had previously reported on in one of the last follow-ups about this, and they're still going to be upset about this. I can't wholly blame them. But you have to put more emphasis on the people in authority and power to get these deals done, not being able to fucking compromise. That's what this all comes back to at the end of the day. Indiana, they came out and they're fucking firing. They're ready to go. Illinois has been stalling out since September of 2022. That's how long it's been. That's when they first announced that $5 billion deal that fell through with Arlington Heights. And they, again, have largely not gotten any traction since then. So, again, to see that, you just can't really blame them. Now, again, it is a major step forward. 95-4 vote, man. Illinois wishes they could get to that point right now. And they have yet to. But not much is official yet. As this quote from this Journal Star article states, just last week, Indiana lawmakers announced they had a verbal commitment from the Bears to invest $2 billion in a Hammond Stadium, but no formal deal has been signed. End quote. Everything has to be documented and signed off. This isn't what the hell Jerry Jones is trying to consistently pull off. Hey, I want to talk with Mike, and I'm going to get the verbal okay from him, letting me know that he wants to re-sign with the team. And I'm going to take that at face value for months and months and months on end. To suggest that, hey, I got Micah Parsons back for at least the next 4 years or so. Fuck David Mulligattor. Fuck written documentation. It's about the art of the deal. It's about the art of the deal. No. No chance for you to be pulling off some art of the deal shit here. You have to have everything down in writing. The language has got to be appropriate. I mean, shit, we're seeing that from fucking Illinois. We're seeing it. You gotta have everything precise and on point. And even then, you can still be rejected in this context. So, you can say everything you want to about verbal commitments. That shit isn't going to mean anything until the Bears and, I guess, Indiana in this state sign off on this in a conjoined effort. You're not going to have the right, honestly, to come out and say, oh, hey, the Bears are moving to Indiana. The Bears are moving to Indiana. Oh, man. goodness gracious. Man, that shit just sounds exactly like... oh my gosh, bro. Exactly like that fateful Paul Revere quote before those soldiers came marching in, man. Goodness gracious. And honestly, if that does happen, yeah, they sign off on everything. Yeah, the Bears are coming. The soldiers are coming. Sure, you have all right to scream that shit out, but you can't give out a false alarm like that right now. You just can't do it. I'm sorry, bro. But, man, that's a lot to take in. So, I mean, hey, it's one step forward. It is a massive step forward, but, again, it's not confirmed yet. There hasn't been anything official. And there's still room for Indiana to potentially slip in this regard. But for now, with everything that I've went through, with everything that I've referenced across the last few follow-ups in regards to this case, they're up. And if Illinois wants to retain the rights to their long-tenured, storied, historical NFL franchise, they're going to have to get their shit together and agree on something. That's it. that is all. That's all they have to do. It's not too hard, is it? And okay, to move forward from that, the Rams would promote Nate Scheelhaase to offensive coordinator. Yes, that Nate Scheelhaase, the man who had been getting floated around in head coach talks and potential hires for a good amount of weeks since the offseason began. The Rams would somehow retain his services. Kingsbury, again, is more of an assistant coach now. And, with this report from Schefter coming out, he's going to slide down to that role as an assistant coach. Now, man, McVay is probably still going to be calling the plays. But damn, with what Scheelhaase was able to do coming out of being a passing game coordinator for this team, and we saw what their passing game did, even with it being, out of a seemingly run formation with 13 personnel, bro, you know what Stafford did this season en route to winning his first MVP. You saw how they were carving up defenses left and right to the point where the Seahawks allowed this man to go on an 811-yard tear in games that he lost, leading this Rams offense. And now you have that man as an offensive coordinator, even if it's in name. As I said before, and it makes things even better for Stafford. It makes things even better for a different quarterback that may end up coming through that system. Fuck the other teams in the NFC West. But I've just got to be as fair as possible as a Seahawks fan and come out and say it. What makes a person think that they would really miss a beat this season when you are retaining that kind of coaching potential and you're adding Kingsbury to the mix as an assistant? Dog, you're not missing a step. Real shit. There's nothing more that I have to add to that, because Scheelhaase is projected to be that good, and they keep him on their books for at least one more season. Bro, come on, man. That shit is crazy, dude. You have to respect it, though. That is truly a smart move. Truly. Okay. So, moving on, there is a different follow-up in regards to Teddy Bridgewater. Now, originally, when you go back to the case mentioned in the offseason last year. It was detailed that he was spending over $22,000 and around, well, even over $27,000, I should say, dollars out of his own money to fund for, I guess, expenses with car fares, with clothing, with food, with transportation, and with general housekeeping in regards to the team. And they suspended him for that. The, I guess, high school organization that handles sports amongst Florida high schools. They suspended him. Which, again, to me at the time, made no fucking sense. Especially when you get into some of his context as to why he decided to do what he did. And that was made even more clear. Once he got to the Bucs, he had a press conference and he talked about it. And he explained just how dangerous the neighborhood was. He explained how he saw himself as a player in their shoes at the time, and how he wanted to essentially be a father figure to those guys and take care of them in the best way that he could. And it's like at that point, even if the funding was deemed to be illegal and deemed to be helping a team that had previously won a title in the state in 2024, even if you want to view that as cheating somehow, like, he's honestly doing a good thing. And the fact that they couldn't see through that and just decided to suspend the nigga, it's fucking crazy. But we'd have an update to that, because in terms of another bill that would be sent up to the Senate, although for this one, I haven't heard anything about it being passed or not over the past few days, but if it does, it has a chance to be monumental for not just Florida sports, but high school sports across the country. As this quote states from CBS Sports, following an incident that led NFL quarterback Teddy Bridgewater to be suspended from his high school coaching duties, the Florida Senate passed a bill that would make his infraction legal. According to Local 10 News, the Teddy Bridgewater bill allows high school head coaches to use personal funds to provide financial assistance to their players, so long as they report what they spend. End quote. Teddy Bridgewater bill. How much respect do you have to have for the man there? Florida-born man. He committed it initially and it was deemed an infraction. It's like, okay, you know, if this does come to pass, all right, that's legal. And why don't we give some credit to the man who might have started off everything in this regard, in Teddy Bridgewater? It's definitely massive respect. But reporting what you spend here is definitely a key point that I want to take away here. Because even if it was deemed illegal, well, by that logic, Teddy Bridgewater already did it. The only reason we found out that he was spending around $27,000 on these expenses was because he put this out on social media in the first place and talked about it. Now, I would believe that you're probably reporting this to the association involved in this entire thing, and maybe to different districts and everything like that, I'd assume. But he already handled that, and yet he had to deal with that. Like, okay. They mentioned in CBS Sports article as well that there is also a similar bill apparently moving through the Florida House as we speak. Another important component of the bill, though, is that the amount of money is going to matter. As this quote also says from USA Today, if passed, the bill would allow high school coaches to use up to $15,000 of personal funds to support student athletes with things like transportation and food, end quote. So up to $15,000. taking that number from Teddy Bridgewater into account, he'd be way over, damn near doubling the legal qualifying amount that would be granted and permitted by the legislation if this bill passes. That's definitely a lot. And again, I think it just goes to show how dire the situation was getting. Because when looking at it generally across the country, that's a general conversation that many could be asking themselves. Shouldn't the state be providing more resources to assist athletes and coaches dealing with that kind of point in the first place? Shouldn't have to get to that point. Now, again, Teddy Bridgewater's just doing that out of the kindness of his own heart. But if you're still going to dock the man just because he's $12,000 over, that should be a message to you to step up your end of the bargain a little more. Work with him. Gotta have a bit of a better split here if you're asking him to temper down that number completely. Because even with this bill passing, it's not like the problems that are being faced by some of these high school teams are just going to all of a sudden completely piss away. Like, they're still going to be around. You have to commit yourself to doing other things that are going to eradicate that kind of behavior and those kinds of trends out of the system. Maybe not completely, but enough to, again, at least alleviate the burden a little bit. Gotta compromise. Gotta work with the man a little bit. That's all I'm saying. You know? Yeah, okay. Right. So as this quote from USA Today states, it passed the state Senate unanimously, collecting 38 votes. The bill will now head to the Florida House of Representatives, and if it passes through that government body without issue, it will head to the governor's desk, where Ron DeSantis will sign the bill into law. End quote. So that is really the next step in this one. Not much more to add on top of that, because I'd be stretching the point. But it's definitely going to be huge if they get it done. And we will see if they can, honestly. Obviously could recheck again at this point. There may be an update. And I honestly do hope that it passes, because it would help a lot of coaches out. It at least is a nice first step to have. But again, like $15,000, and maybe the other bill in the House was set to provide a little bit more of a cushion for permitted money for coaches to spend on their teams to assist with these different expenses. But I'm not sure about that. I can't confirm that. They didn't have any other details on that. So, that's pretty interesting. But yeah, like, what stuff, man. Okay. The Cowboys would have a pair of moves in tandem. Firstly, they would release Logan Wilson. Didn't even have that man for a full season, and they already said his ass is gone. Like, I mean, let's just see. Because, like, he couldn't have done all that much with the Cowboys as it was. It's like, dude, like, come on, man. And, I mean, taking the Logan Wilson acquisition into account along with Quinnen Williams, I mean, like, you still... Even if they may not mean all that much, you gave away extensive draft capital, especially to get Williams. And you, like, exchanged a pick for Logan Wilson or something like that. You're sending all that away, and you don't even get much of anything out of Logan Wilson. I can see why you could concede, I should say. Because... they expected Logan Wilson to come in and automatically be a bit of a wrecking ball for them at the linebacker position, one that they desperately needed. It was one of their weaker positions on the field, and yet they were still in a situation where they much rather preferred to play one of their other rookies in, I think it was James, number 50 on their team, the linebacker for them, purebred rookie, and they still decided to give him more playing time. At the trade deadline, they got him, and from that point forward, Logan Wilson only started in 1 out of the 7 games he played in, only had 24 tackles, and I guess the season overall was a struggle for him. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how other teams look at him moving forward. But my goodness, that is just virtually not much contributed to the Cowboys when he was expected to just be a diamond in the rough for them and be a guy that might not have cost all that much but could legitimately bolster that core. Didn't even come remotely close to doing that. In fact, damn near phased himself out of the rotation. That's how bad it got. So I guess from that standpoint it makes sense. On the other hand, they would sign Javonte Williams to a 3-year, $24 million contract extension. And might I add that it is well-deserved. It does not make Javonte Williams one of the highest paid running backs in the league, especially with some of the new contracts over the last couple years. When you look at guys like James Cook III, when you look at guys like Saquon Barkley coming through and getting their deals, they're definitely paid a lot more. But man, Javonte Williams last season, he's coming into it, he's on a prove-it deal, and he more than proved himself by putting up career highs across the board. Honestly, that coincides with it being his healthiest season as well, which was something that Javonte Williams had been struggling with over the first few years of his career. But when it came time to it, you get the right blend of health, trust from the coaching staff, and just some good strides taken as an overall player. And he put it all together this season. 1,201 yards on the ground and 11 touchdowns to go along with 137 yards out of the backfield and 2 scores as well. It was definitely a great season for him. One of the better running back seasons from last year that maybe won't get talked about because of him not necessarily being a household name. But the Cowboys are well within their right to at least try to maximize on this investment. You can't see a season like that and not invest in him further. Now again, it's a cheaper contract, but again, it begs the question, you did the right thing in extending him, because there could be a genuine fear of losing him in the offseason. But you have Stephen Jones come out and say that you are just as you want just as much to keep this man on the team. And you saw what he put together on a 1-year deal. Even if he's going to be a bit more expensive, they're still trying to fucking franchise tag George Pickens. They're still trying to. In the context of that move is the same thing as you re-signing Javonte Williams. The move could have boomed or busted with it being a prove-it deal. And you got it done. You saw the talent on full display. You saw the production and how great it was for you. And you still do not have it in your mind to re-sign George Pickens completely. You want to put him on a franchise tag. Where the fuck is the consistency at? Man, I tell you, bro. I fucking tell you, dog. Shit crazy, man. You cannot be serious, bro. Oh my gosh, Man, oh man, bro. I tell you, bro. Like that is so crazy. You see that and you're still thinking to yourself, I want to franchise tag him. Why? For what? Like, come on, man. Moving on from that into, honestly, something that is going to hit much more. And it's not to take away from all of the other deaths that I've had to report relating to different sports players in this time. It doesn't take away from anything like that at all. And I don't intend for it to do so. But at the same time, this was a person that I was literally just watching play in the preseason. And, you know, I'm coming across a video on my feed relating to that same preseason play. And it mentions that that would be his final one. And then it says, R.I.P. Rondale Moore. And I'm thinking to myself, in that moment right there, what the fuck happened to Rondale Moore? So I do a little bit of digging, and then you just hit with the absolute worst in that moment. It was detailed by that post and multiple articles that, quote, per CBS Sports, Rondale Moore, 25, died on Saturday of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, said New Albany Police Chief Tom Bailey, who told multiple local media outlets that Moore's body was found in a garage. An autopsy is scheduled for Sunday, per WLKY TV. Moore was born and grew up in New Albany, Indiana. End quote. Dead at 25. Right around, essentially, my generation of football players that I would have far more knowledge about. And again, a person that I had literally just been watching in the preseason. Gone? Completely. It's like you hadn't heard about him, anything about him, in quite some time. And for many people, that was the first piece of news you heard in a while. And that's what you're met with? It's enough to crush somebody. And it crushed multiple athletes. You had Max Crosby come out with a statement. You had Marquise Brown essentially say he was just texting him just before whatever may have happened. Like, it's crazy. And especially in a player like Marquise Brown's situation. And I'll make this point several times. The videos that I watched on it from low reps and also microphone were very well done on their front. But in the latter video, Marquise Brown had a text that was shown that essentially stated to Rondale Moore that it's like, hey, I'm texting you low-key. I'm talking to myself sometimes too because I'm dealing with some of the same stuff. And that just puts things into perspective. Like in these situations, you can assume a lot of different things. But Rondale Moore was truly in contact with someone, at least one person. And sometimes that's all it can take, even if it doesn't feel that way. But at least one person was going through the same things. And yet still, it might not have been enough to keep him around for a longer period of time. It's definitely just a tragedy all around. And it's like, to just put things in perspective like that, I'll go over the play because, again, this was a game between the Texans and the Vikings in the preseason that I was watching live. And he's getting essentially a routine underneath route, trying to put the world-class speed he possessed to use, even though it had been tested through injury after injury after injury. He got back on the field with a chance to, start out his prove-it deal with the Vikings on a good note. And on that play, he's tackled from behind. I don't know if it was ruled like a dirty hit or anything like that, but he was tackled from behind, and he deals with another lower leg injury as he gets carted off. Head completely blanketed inside the towel as he's getting carted off the field. In absolute despair, just throwing his hands up. Like, honestly, at that point, I've done everything I can do as a human being. I've done everything I can do as an athlete to reach this point, to try to get back out there, to try to prove what I've got. And still, what gives? What can I fucking do anymore? That might have been Rondale Moore's mindset in that very moment. Would actually end up being his last on an NFL field. Because at that time, he's going to be getting treated for this. He's not going to be on the game day roster, especially on IR. He's going to be in his own space, probably by design, taking that time out to try to recover, try to rehab it for as long as he possibly needs to and get himself right for potentially some more action moving forward. Again, you hear that quote from the New Albany police chief about a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And I'm like, I don't want to think about it being a mental health thing. We genuinely don't know. The autopsy still has not been released to this point. We have no idea. I don't want to assume anything like that. But at the same time, when you're seeing all of that go down, when you're having Rondale Moore deal with years of this, it can eat away at you. And at a point, maybe it did just feel like Rondale Moore, for as much talent as he had to showcase to the world, for as much as he had to put on display as a genuine human being, maybe he might have personally felt like he had given all that he could and then some. And still, as fate would have it, things were just not clicking in the NFL. I could read stats off, and again, some of the videos do a similar thing, but honestly, they make a good point about this as well. The numbers aren't going to tell you the full story. Especially in the season where he put together his best career year and even had a solid amount of rushing yards. They were using him as a running back that season in 2023. They were just trying to phase him out of the offense further and further and further, as his role was diminishing through no real control of his own. The skill set was always there. It was a matter of injuries with him. Literally, since that freshman season where he took college football by storm in something that honestly no one will ever really forget. That was one of the first things that so many people remembered him by. Ever since that point of time, he'd been injured with a number of lower leg injuries, hamstring, foot sprain, ankle, you name it. Just completely hampered down there. And it kept on getting progressively worse to where he would miss more time. And yet the Cardinals, when he was initially drafted, still decided, okay, we're going to take a chance on him. But, again, it moves quickly. And, at that point, he's not providing much to the team. He gets traded to the Falcons. Doesn't provide much to the team there. It's waived rather, sent to the Vikings for a potential last chance. And can't even prove himself because of another injury. Physically, he is in despair. Mentally, he's in some deep shit at that point. And again, the Flemmo Raps video and microphone video also do a good job of approaching it from this standpoint. At that point, you're away from everybody else, but you still are subject to seeing so much material that just doesn't relate to what it is that you're going through. You're trying to keep up with all this stuff through a completely different lens, and you are so out of touch. Again, through no real fault of your own, through no real control, that you have no other way to really take some of this stuff. And it's heartbreaking, to say the least. The reactions haven't been all positive, and the videos make sure to point this out as well, because man, there would be some former players and other members of the league just completely going for the way that these teams handle this. Because the Vikings and the NFL did have their own conjoined statements. But essentially from guys like Jamal Adams and also Braden Fehoko, a now retired defensive lineman, it's disingenuous. Because while you can have these press release statements, you are doing nothing from their perspective to truly show that care for the player while they're alive and dealing with these situations in real time. And it's interesting to look at it that way. Rondale Moore, by all accounts, is a person, honestly, probably keeps to himself a lot. Definitely more on the quieter side. You have everything coming out about, the different alternatives to reach out to, talking to somebody, calling the 988 number. And you know what? Yes, that does go without saying. Let me see this real quick. That does remind me. Let me see if I can find that. I guess I can get to that in time. But yes, you have that out, and yet players still feel uncomfortable to take those into application because it's an unpopular thing to do. I mean, and those videos make it very clear as well. But, from my perspective, it's definitely always cool to see, different clips and videos of locker rooms getting hyped up and everything like that, and maybe having a little bit of banter here and there. That's what makes a show like Hard Knocks, for example, so convincing to audiences. And, you're going to get nothing but raw emotion, frustration, anger in those kinds of settings. But those players think that there should be just as much room for raw emotion when it comes to, dealing with these mental health struggles in the same way. Because players, and I can agree, honestly should be able to reach out and not be frowned upon by the masses if they do so. I mean, it's crazy. Like, there can be a lot more that goes into different, chronic, I should say, injuries for people. It's not necessarily a matter of being injury prone, but man, you're trying to come back, you're trying to shed that narrative off about yourself, and then you have other people just contributing to a loud-ass conversation about just how much of that you are, with you understanding that isn't true. And again, having to hear that on repeat, ultimately it's going to settle in. Maybe I am injury prone. Maybe I don't have as much worth to the team, to the sport, to the people as I once did. And damn, like, that shit can fucking derail the mind. They had a reference to it, I believe, in the Flimlow Raps video, and I'll be sure to cite them both in like the cards feature for this particular one. Sprinkle it in across this entire one, because I have to. Like, they were genuinely well done, but they play the moment where Andrew Luck is being open and honest about his struggle with injury at that point, because he'd been so banged up at that time, and he still was so young to that point, feeling a need to preserve himself for future endeavors. He decided to retire, and the Colts fans booed the shit out of him. Now, I know some of them may try to switch up now and have the ultimate regret for that, but no, you meant exactly what you did in that moment. And that kind of reinforces the point that, some of these former players and players may run with. Teams don't give a damn about you. These people in the media don't give a damn about you. Sometimes it be your own fans. They don't give a damn about you. When you're down, they just care about when you are at your highest of highs, contributing at a high level to the team, to your, I guess, overall quality of life. And for these bitch-ass people out here, to their fucking parlays. They're like, these are human beings. They're not fucking tools that you can just play around with and then throw away when you're done. No, that's not how this works. They're real fucking people. And again, you see it all the time with people getting so invested in this fucking gambling shit. Nobody gives a fuck. These are real people. You are not a fan if you're going to boo a nigga the second that they don't have a great performance for you, or the second that they decide to wisely, in some cases, put themselves first. When we get into load management and stuff like that, that might be a different story. And that's where I can add my own spin on this. The situation going on with Peterson right now, another young player, Darren Peterson, is crazy. Not to get too much into it, but to already say that he is injury prone. And again, yes, as a player in the NIL landscape, those conversations are going to ramp up for sure. But the man is also 18 years old. If he is truly dealing with something that could be debilitating in the long run, why would he continue to throw himself out there like that? Why? And then on a more resonating note, John Wall, wrote in the Players Tribune about how much he struggled at that time, especially during the COVID year, that time away from basketball, that time away from doing what he loved, on top of already dealing with lost seasons due to lower leg injuries. completely fucked up his mental. And he made it a point to emphasize how much he had been struggling with thoughts of self-harm himself during that period of time, before being able to turn it around by having the right amount of support, the right community around him to rejuvenate his whole state of mind, his whole condition, no matter what. And you would hope that there was genuinely more for that when it comes to Rondale's story in this situation. We can't guarantee that. And again, from the standpoint of the players, doesn't feel like the NFL themselves, doesn't feel like the Vikings themselves were doing that a whole lot, which would be ironic considering the fact that with something else that I hadn't recently talked about, but there had recently been a settlement in the case involving the woman who took the life of former Vikings rookie cornerback Kyrie Jackson in 2024. We're still dealing with that. We're still dealing with the aftermath of that. But now you have a player in Rondale Moore, even if he's not coming to you speaking out about this. He's in your organization. He's a part of your team. He's there when Kyrie Jackson isn't. And people are still torn about that. And you don't, under any circumstance, take it upon yourself to check up on the man in that situation, when you had already been dealing with a point that no one else had been bringing up. You are still dealing with the loss of Kyrie Jackson, who didn't even get to see his NFL career flourish, didn't even get to take the field with the team because of that, without still being fresh on players' minds. And yet, you, again, with the view of some of these other players out here, just completely ignore whatever it is that Rondale Moore might have been dealing through, or going through, or dealing with, in his mental state, just because he's not physically in the building. It's a shame. To add even more just heartbreak to it, was mentioned in those videos that it all goes back to former Purdue University student Tyler Trent, who had passed away in 2019 due to complications with his own form of cancer at that point. And again, you constantly think about that game. I constantly remember that game. And that was for him. You have them and Rondale Moore lining it up on the scoreboard all night long against the Ohio State in that game. And again, a moment in which no one will forget, to show you just how great college football is. How beautiful the sport can be. Every single time, damn near, a big play was being made. Because that was the profile story. I think that it was Jen Latta still covering that responsibility for College Game Day at that time. That was the profile story. And every single time they were making a play in that game, they were panning the camera back over to him. And the kind of person Rondale Moore clearly was at that point, it only made things better to know that those two had started to develop a pretty tight-knit relationship with each other before his passing. And to try to pay tribute here, their foundation and a journal for the Purdy program, they would put together a little bit of a mural with Moore and Trent together. That is just the kind of stuff that is like, man, it breaks your heart. Clearly, Rondale Moore was trying to do this for other people. And yet he couldn't even say that enough people weren't his, or maybe didn't feel that way, which can be the case when you're looking at this from a mental health standpoint. It's unfortunate. Truly, man. So, again, I would hope, I would hope that it is not anything like that. I suppose, we'll find out in time. But, man, boy. It is tough, man. Oh, man. Rondale Moore. Man, oh man. Oh man, bro. Goodness gracious. Hold on. Let me see if I can find this real quick. I gotta see if I can find this. Wait a second, because it is important. Again, there needs to be a lot more that goes into it. But man, let me see. Man. Dang, man. Alright, let me see. Alright, man. Okay. Alright. I guess you just say this right here, okay? If you or someone you know is having thoughts of self-harm or experiencing a mental health or substance use crisis, 988 provides direct connection to free, confidential, and compassionate support. When you call, text, or chat 988, you'll be quickly connected to trained crisis counselors who will listen to your concerns, provide support, and connect you to additional resources if needed. There is hope. The Lifeline works. You are not alone in crisis. For 24/7 confidential support, just call, text, or chat 988. Please, if you feel the need to do it, do it. It can and has been proven to, in most cases, change and save lives. Just do it. It's always tough to ask for help. But if you are in a head state where you need it, where you are looking for support, man, That is something you cannot pass up on. Genuinely. To briefly get into a couple more developments here that happened over the past couple of days, because honestly, it made sense for me. I'm thinking about it. I'm going over it in my head. It makes more sense for me to just end off the video entirely after discussing that. But I'll just briefly address these 3 other developments here. The Falcons would place the franchise tag on Kyle Pitts Sr., which will be worth a 1-year, $15 million deal. And they also stated that they plan to release Kirk Cousins upon the start of the new league year. Meanwhile, Detroit is set to play in Germany next season, which will be their first overseas game since 2015. And the Jaguars and the Commanders, as of today, are also set to face off in London, with the Jags now having 2 games in that area next season. And as for that, that'll do it for this one. Like I said, it was going to be an emotional roller coaster. So I can't even really sit here and expect people to watch this in its entirety and enjoy it. Like, no, you're going to go through a lot delving into the entirety of this one. But again, especially with cases like that, it's well worth it. You can't sugarcoat something like that. You have to be honest and upfront about that, because it is real. Like, I still, even with that commentary coming out, from that, group of players. And, I've seen some, posts of it with people saying, oh, they're just not fans of the league anymore. Like, I'm not going to lie to you and say that. No, I'm still going to be a fan of the league and of the sport. But, man, you have got to be able to travel into a deeper depth of perspective in cases like these. Because, again, sometimes, sometimes I should say, even with sports being a good way for some people, a good amount of people even, to serve as a distraction from other ailments and other situations that they may be facing in life, there are going to be moments in time where those 2 things of life and sports intersect, and you need to be able to know what the hell you are doing in terms of covering it, to handle it with the grace and attention that it deserves. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.